BenQ MA270U versus Dell UltraSharp U2725QE. And the real question is whether the Dell's higher price actually earns itself on a Mac desk. The BenQ is tuned around MacBook color and keyboard controls with 90 watts of charging, while the Dell pushes 140 watts, Thunderbolt 4, and a built-in dock you may never touch. By the end, you'll know which one fits how you work. Let's break it down. Let's start with the thing you'll notice within 5 minutes of plugging either one in, which is how macOS actually treats the screen. Both are 27-inch 4K panels, so text lands in that same in-between zone. Sharp, comfortable, clearly better than a 14-inch laptop screen. But don't confuse 4K with a 5K Retina experience. If you're coming off an iMac or a studio display, you will see the difference at close range. Where the BenQ MA270U pulls ahead is the Mac-specific stuff. Brightness and volume respond to your MacBook keyboard over that single USB-C cable, and the color modes are tuned toward MacBook Air and Pro panels with 95% P3 coverage. That's a small thing that stops being small around day 3. The Dell, for its part, ships factory calibrated to a Delta E under 1.5 with 99% DCI-P3. So if your work is color critical, that number carries more weight than any Mac branding. One caution on the BenQ though. That Mac color tuning gets you close, but sitting next to an actual Apple display, some owners still see colors that don't quite line up even after fiddling with settings. Close is not identical, and that fiddling matters because BenQ's finer controls live in a downloadable app. Here's the thing about connectivity, and it's where the Dell earns its premium. Thunderbolt 4 handles video, data, and up to 140 watts of charging on one cable, plus DisplayPort in and out, HDMI, USB-A, downstream USB-C, and 2.5 gigabit Ethernet. That's a dock, not a monitor with ports. The BenQ takes a simpler route with 90 watts over USB-C, 2 HDMI, and a couple of USB-A ports. 90 watts covers a MacBook Air and most Pro work comfortably. But if you're running a 16-inch Pro Hard, 140 gives you headroom. Watch the wording on the BenQ though, because dual USB-C sounds like 2 laptop inputs, and it isn't. One is the 90-watt display connection, the other is a 15-watt downstream port for charging your phone or iPad. One more practical note on the Dell. The bundled cables run short, so if your MacBook doesn't sit right beside the screen, plan on buying a longer one. On the panel itself, they're closer than the spec sheets suggest for daily work. The Dell's IPS Black gives you 3000 to 1 contrast versus 1200 to 1 on the BenQ. And you see that in dark rooms and dark interfaces, not in a spreadsheet. It also runs at 120 Hz against the BenQ's 60. And honestly, scrolling and cursor movement do feel noticeably smoother. If you also game a little, don't oversell that to yourself, because response times are the weak spot here and fast motion still smears. And if HDR movies are the plan, the Dell's edge-lit backlight means grayish blacks rather than anything dramatic. Some reviewers also noticed clouding on dark screens. The BenQ counters with a matte finish, plenty of owners were skeptical about and ended up liking. And there's an opinion about the MA270U that stuck with me. This has the least light bleed in the corners I have ever seen on a monitor, and with the display software set up properly, the text is essentially as sharp as an Apple display unless you go looking for pixels. For sitting in front of one all day, both give you height, tilt, swivel, and pivot, with 115 millimeters of travel on the BenQ. Both include eye care modes, though the Dell adds an ambient light sensor that adjusts brightness as your room changes, which is one less thing to reach for at dusk. That's a real convenience, not a headline. Along the same lines, the Dell's built-in KVM lets one keyboard and mouse jump between a Mac and a PC, and owners who use it call it the reason they bought the thing. If you only have a MacBook, it's a feature you'll set up once and forget. On reliability, neither shows a worrying pattern, though a Mac user did hit a compatibility error with the Dell and one BenQ owner had a panel fail inside a couple of months, both isolated. Speakers are a wash. The BenQ's 3-watt pair gets called flat-out terrible by owners, so budget for external ones either way. So where does the extra money go? The Dell costs quite a bit more, and you're paying for Thunderbolt 4, 140-watt charging, the full dock with Ethernet and KVM, factory calibration, and that 120 Hz panel. The BenQ costs less because it skips the dock and the refresh rate, and spends its budget on Mac-specific color and keyboard integration instead. Here's the call. For a MacBook First Desk, I'd take the BenQ MA270U because the keyboard controls, the matte color tuning, and the cleaner corners cover what you'll actually feel every day, and it costs less doing it. But if you bounce between a Mac and a PC, the Dell's dock and KVM settle it on their own. And if you run a 16-inch Pro at full tilt, or your paycheck depends on color being exact, the extra charging headroom and factory calibration are worth paying more for. If you only ever plug in one laptop, Though, most of that dock sits unused. And you, which one would you pick? Let me know in the comments. Links below in the description.